All right, so let's start with InfraWorks. There are a couple of ways you can bring a 3D model or building model into InfraWorks. Option number one we covered the other day is you can create a 2D profile, right? Then you can assign the where is the building? Here we go. You can assign material, then double click, it will create a building for you. You can control the site by dragging the height. You can replace the different facade, right? So this is one way to do the building. And there's very limited options here available. For instance, if you want to customize the roof, you have the option to make the slope, but it always has a default way to generate this roof. As a result, you don't really have much option in terms of the details, right? And the second option to bring a building in is using the style palette. So here, if you go to 3D, you can go to buildings, residential. You can see a bunch of 3D model here. You could use a city furniture to load this building, or you can just drag and drop directly into existing building. So it will swap that building into this one. As you can see, this building is really detailed, right? With the texture, you have really nice control on the look of it, and you can also control the scale. You can change the orientation. So this is another way you bring the 3D model, but there's only limited options here with single family, with something like a church, right? But how you can customize by yourself, maybe create from external program and then bring in. The third option actually I want to show you is Revit. Believe it or not, so this is a Revit model. I bring this, I brought this Revit model in through the data source. So here you can add a new Revit model as a 3D. Actually here Revit Autodesk Revit. So this is actually pretty powerful. You can bring a Revit directly here. But as you can see, this is that building we designed or we modeled, right? It's fully detailed. This building is pretty big. It's definitely not a low poly building. So that's not exactly the way we want this in. So for the Revit model, I just want to show you one more time. Once you bring in a Revit, if you double click, I think you can still be able to position this Revit model. By default, is always using the center point as a pivot, and we'll bring that file in. Just make sure you do the interactive placing, so you can ping the location of this Revit model. If you don't do that, InfraWorks will try to load the GPS or the real location from your Revit project. If you set the project location in Revit, it might be able to understand where it is and overlay with your InfraWorks. If you did not set up correctly, this Revit model could be miles away from your current InfraWorks. So that could be very confusing because when you load, nothing shows up. So I would prefer you do this as interactive placing. So you just pinpoint your Revit model. Okay, so there are a couple of options you can bring the building in. Today we are not really doing a Revit model. I would like to do a super low polygon model, probably in Revit, in 3ds Max and Rhino. That would be the pretty simple solution to do that. And as you can see, this model example is all the details is actually generated by texture mapping, right? Like windows, doors, they are not really 3 dimension. The goal is you want to do as low as possible, the low poly, right? You should also compare the Google Earth or Street Map just to figure out if you can just using the existing model. If there's something already there, you don't have to model. but something if it's quite unique, you want to customize, bring that exactly like the site, then you can bring your Rhino or 3ds Max model in. Okay, so that is the goal for this exercise, low poly model. So first, let's start with Rhino. This is really simple. I assume you guys already did a lot of work with Rhino, so I will go through this relatively fast. Let me know if you want me to slow down and talk more. The first thing, if you want to render low poly model in Rhino, is the scale. Right? The current one, I think the default unit is feet. That's how I set up the new file at the beginning. You can set up the unit as feet. And then I'm going to just create a simple box so I can get a rough idea about the scale I'm talking about. So if you do, let's see, 10 feet, or maybe 20 feet. Oh. Right, and then you can type, I don't know, 100 feet, maybe the height is 10 feet. Right, so you have a box. That would be the first thing I would do, is get something kind of as your reference. Right, so I know the scale is correct. Then what I did is just make a really simple representation of your building. So here's a box. Here is actually a triangle. I extruded this triangle along the z-axis. I'm pretty sure you know how to do it, right? Just draw the profile, then you can extrude the surface, right? On the surface, you do want to think, if I want to use this front, so this roof is extended a little bit beyond the wall, but I might have another version is on the back. This roof is directly aligned to the wall. So you can make this model more useful. In the future, if you load to the side, maybe a different building has a different roof extension, you just rotate this building 180 degrees. So you can use this model serve both sides. Make sense? So don't try to make things symmetric, make things not symmetric. So you can use that in multiple views. You can see the same logic here. I add a little bit, extra extensions on one side. So I know in the future, if I want to use a building to make it look like a simple roof like this, I will just rotate in this angle. But if I want to use a different version, I just rotate 180 degrees. That makes sense? So just try to maximize the usability of your model. And also, another trick is make sure the model is very clean. So when I model this guy, you can see I use the snap to grade. This is actually a really useful trick, grade snap. So when you draw a line from corner to corner, it's always snapped to the grade. In the future, we'll make a boolean using two files. It's gonna be a really clean edge. You don't want to have like a tiny gap in between, right? So always using the snap to grade. So here you can see my triangle is perfectly aligned, right, to that top surface of the box. Right, so just make a very clean model. That's the rule. So once I have these multiple pieces, so if I make a selection, you can see this is all solid surface, poly surface. I have two poly surface, one surface. That's fine. Then the next step is you want to start to uniting them together. You do want to be careful if you see some tiny kind of overlapping like this. This is not good, because if you generate extra faces, right? You have at least will generate 1, 2, 3, 3 new faces. Plus, this big roof will be break apart into 3, maybe more than 3 triangles. So you do want to make sure the model is somehow overlapped perfectly, right, to each other. Then I'm go ahead to uniting this together, right? So here's a Rhino. You're uniting the surface. You done, right? So that's basically one single object, really clean, right? The next step I want to do is to actually reduce the number of surface. So this can be done by explode. I break apart this poly surface into individual surface. Right. So now if I select, you have 20 surfaces. Okay. To save a little bit budget of the polygon, I can delete the one at the bottom. Right. Because you never see the bottom. So the most efficient way is you delete or remove all the face which is invisible. In this case, it's just the bottom part is invisible. All of other face are visible, so you don't want to delete. Actually, this face is invisible, right? The bottom here, I will delete as well. Right? So go as low as you can. All right, that looks pretty good. Then I'm go ahead to uniting this roof surface together. So you can use join, right? So basically you merged all the surface as a single group using join. For the wall, I will just select everything, then deselect the roof. Right, so this is all the left for the wall. I will just join them together. So you have basically two objects now. One is a roof, another is a wall. Make sense? Right. So this is important in Rhino. You want to somehow break apart the model based on the material. So later I can assign a different material to the roof, to the wall. The next thing I'm gonna do is to convert this into a mesh. So here, mesh from surface, from NURB. NURB is a surface model, right? Same thing. So from NURB, and here's a really important thing. You do want to drag the polygons as low as possible, like left 0 type, right? So click OK. So this is perfect for rectilinear shape. However, if you do model something like a mailbox, for example, you might want to slightly move up this a little bit if the mailbox has a circular round shape surface. Okay, so for me, I will just drag all the way to the left, click OK. So now if you drag your selection away, you can actually see the duplicated mesh version show up. So that is a really clean model. If you select the roof, you can tell it's only take a few polygons, right? Really clean. If I select the wall, that's really clean too. Okay, so this can be done in Max for sure, but I think because you're all familiar with Rhino, let's see if you can use Rhino as a start point. So now we have one mesh, two mesh, right? One for roof, one for wall. Then the next step is I want to start to assign some basic materials. Right. So the first thing I would do is I want to find a material for the roof. I would recommend you just search online, use Google, find something close. Keep in mind we are doing like a winter thing, right? Like a snow-covered roof, or could be like really cold weather. You probably want to reduce the saturation of the color a little bit, because in the winter time, not like a summer, you reflect a lot of sunlight. Something really like a winter look. For the elevation, I'm sure you know how to do Photoshop work. Just find something close to the building you want to model and do some Photoshop work. So in this case, as you can see, I did a super quick Photoshop facade. I'm sure you can do a better job than me. I just lay out a few windows, add a little bit color for the bottom part of the wall, the roof part of the wall. I do have a door here. It's not really accurate, but it's okay. I just want to give us some sense of the scale. So I have these two images as a JPEG, elevation and the roof. There's one thing I do want to mention about the resolution, right? Because when you model things in Photoshop, it's always wondering how high the resolution should be. In my opinion, for a medium size image. Later I'm gonna apply to the whole facade. This is the resolution I usually use, 1020 by 512. As you can see, it's a power of 2. Right, that is the best for game engine. Just keep this. If you want to do a square shape, I would do 512 by 512. Okay. If you do really large, want to mapping a large building, with a big facade, you could double this, maybe to 1024 to 1024. But I wouldn't go up beyond 1024. It just makes the image not necessarily, high rise. In the game engine, you won't really see much different if you do a high rise or medium sized resolution. So 1024 by 512. That is the resolution I use a lot. And also make sure it's RGB. Okay, and you'll save as a JPEG. When you save JPEG, the compression you can choose 8 or below. Don't do 12. That makes the image too big. Make sense? Okay. So I have 2 images. Then I go back to Rhino. I'm gonna generate 2 materials. This is really some Rhino stuff. So here, if you go to render, you can turn on this toothpaste. Right. This is a material editor. And here you can add a new material. I would go with a custom, right? It's a standard custom material. So you can give name as the roof, for example, or roof 2. I already have that. So in the roof 2, you want to make that image as your color channel, right? So here in the color, I will click a sun. I will point to the roof. Actually, you know what? This roof I didn't reduce the polygon yet. So let's do that really quick. I think this is true for all of you. Because the roof, I'm going to repeat this tile, right, many times. So it's not really necessary for me to have a high resolution. I would do 1256 by 1256. That is good enough for the simple texture like this. If you do worried about the tile effects, this is another trick. You could make this tile offset a little bit. So if I want offset, let's see, 100 pixels, right? It basically shift the pixels along X and Y. You can see here is actually that edge. Can you see that? It's very manual, very subtle. But here is the edge. So if you do want to do a perfect aligned roof, you want to do some Photoshop work, maybe to patch up this edge a little bit. So that will look perfect. One way to do that is using the stamp. I haven't been using that for a long time. So here's the stamp. So when you do the clone stamp, you can sort of I think it's holding out to pick a point. Then here you can, do the stamp to remove some of the edges. But anyhow, I will leave this to you. For me, I'm pretty okay with the current one. So I save it. And just make sure in Rhino, I want to just update the link. So that will load this guy. Okay. Alright, so that is how you do the image attached to a material. Then the next thing I want to do is make sure I select the roof, right click, assign to objects, right? I'm pretty sure you know how to do this. You're done. In order to see the roof, you can switch to rendered. Oh, actually I did the wrong one, did I? So here's the roof. Did I give the wrong one? Assign to objects. Oh, that's strange. Why it showed up as a wall? I don't understand. So go to the properties of this roof. I will check the material. So it does show up as a roof. Huh. That is super strange. Why the roof show up as a wall? That is really strange. So let me just redo a new material. Oh, I think maybe it's because the texture linked to the wrong one. Well, let's do this. I will delete the one I just created. There's something wrong. I will just create a new one. Well, let's do this all together. So I will delete whatever old materials there. Okay, so it's all clean. I got a bunch of versions. So I will switch to shaded. Okay, so this is a polygon, right? Sorry, this is a mesh. I will create a new one. Roof 3. Right. For the color. So right now there's no texture. I will go ahead, assign to this. Check, that's good. Then I will right click, assign to objects. Right? So now if I switch to rendered, I don't know what happened. That is really strange. Let me save the file anyway. Let's just create a new one. Oh, once I save it, it shows up. I don't really understand. Maybe it's because of memory, I guess. I'm using the same material name twice. Maybe it has something embedded. I don't know. If you see something weird happen, just reopen the file. I think that will solve 99% of these problems. All right. So this roof is assigned to this mesh. That's good. It shows up. But here's the problem, right? It looks too big. By default, it's just into the 1x1 tile. So the entire image is just projected on the roof. A couple of ways you can change it. One way is to change the how many times you repeat this tile. I prefer not to do this way because sometimes when you transfer across multiple software, this data might get lost. So I prefer do the conventional way, which is using the mapping. If you heard about the mapping, it's basically, so in the property of these objects, if you click texture mapping, there are multiple ways you can wrap around a 2D image to a 3D object. So this technique called mapping or projection, right? So you can see these options here, like planar, box, spherical, right? We covered this way back to the beginning of this semester. You can also see these options when you go to the render tools, and you can see these mapping options available here as well. So from multiple places you can access the mapping. So for the roof, I will do a planar mapping, right? It's from top down, so along the z-axis. You can just click this guy. This is a planar mapping. Apply the planar mapping. So immediately on the command line, will ask you to define the corner of a plan. So basically, you just define like a tiny rectangular shape. This shape will be used to control the scale of your texture. So you want to make sure something close to a rectangle. Click, that's the shape. Then you use enter to finish. So immediately you can see that tile is being repeat across the roof. You can also see something different happened if you check the property of the texture mapping. You do see these three values show up, 551. This is actually equal to XYZ, sort of. So here, if I think, well, this roof is too small, I can change this to 10 by 10. I don't care about the Z, so you can see the tile will be doubled. This is the place you can actually access this mapping. If you do want to see this, mapping rectangle shape, you can click this show mapping. So it will redisplay this yellow color rectangular shape. So you can actually move this around. You can move up and down, to adjust the location. This value will update in the panel as well. Okay, so you got the idea. To change the position, you can just drag it. You see it's swimming, right? The texture is kind of swimming across the surface, right? If I want to change the scale, just go ahead, type these values right here. Cool. So I'm pretty happy with the roof. Then let's go ahead, create another one for the wall. And I want to give the texture to this guy, the JPEG. And then I will select the roof, right click, assign to objects. So show up, but again the scale is wrong, right? It looks weird. So I will do another mapping. So click the properties, and this time I want to do a box based mapping, right? So here, click that. For box, you want to control the corner. Because I want to stretch the entire elevation across the building, I can just simply pick up one corner to another corner. The height is roughly the same as the height of the building. Then I click enter to finish. So you have this box show up. If I want to display the box, you can actually click this one, show mapping. So you can still see the box. And if you want to make adjustment, you can drag this arrowhead. You can sort of position this box. Okay, you can also drag up and down to change the height. If you do want to control the scale, so right now it's 28 feet, 43 by 15. So if I want to have a double, 2-story high, I will actually reduce the size of the box. So you have, shorter box, and then you can, adjust to multiple levels. Well, in this case, it doesn't matter. So I will do a 10, right? So that is the height. Maybe even more. Let's do 15, because I don't want to show up. Okay, so I think this is good. All right. So that is how you mapped both objects. And after that, I will actually turn off the display. Yeah, because sometimes they are a little bit annoying. So you can turn it off. See, I think I click twice. It should turn off. No? Oh, hide. I have to click hide mapping. That's interesting. Yeah, I thought you can just simply click this twice. Okay, so now it's hidden. That's pretty much what you need to do in Rhino. Then I'm ready to export as FBX, bring into InfraWorks. One final thing you want to do is actually move this guy back to 0, 0. The reason is this object, it could be pretty far away from 0, 0. So when you bring into InfraWorks, using this point, center point 0, 0 as your pivot point. In Rhino, it's not as easy as Max. You can't really change the pivot easily. So I prefer just move the building back to 0, 0. Okay, so that's the snapping point at the bottom. Then I'm going to export selection as FBX. Make sure you have a meaningful name, so the single family SF. If you do this, I would prefer you have your name here, so we know who did this. You can also have a number if you have multiple versions. Okay, so it's FBX. I keep everything as Lambert. Lambert does not have highlight and reflections. So for building, that would be the type of material you choose. Everything else is default. Then here in framework, I will go to the 3D palette. Click this style palette first, right here. Go to 3D. Go to buildings. Go to residential in this case, and here you can add. Okay. Oh, sorry. Actually, add a new category. Let's delete this. Yeah, the add button is at the bottom. Here we go. So here you can point to the FBX. I think it's right here. TM01. Right. So you should be able to see the building show up now. Right. That's pretty nice. There's no bottom. That's okay. And the roof, the wall looks pretty good. All right. And also see in this case I used the anchor point as my local origin, so that is 0, 0. But if you do mess up, you could have this lower left as your option. But I prefer you always move to 0, 0 in Rhino before you export. So that will be a perfect lineup. So I have this guy here. Let's give a name SF TM01. Okay. So I have this new building showed up right here. So if I want to use it, I can just drag and drop, replace the current one. So that looks pretty nice. Okay. So that's the whole process, how to bring a building into infra work. Use Rhino, just purely Rhino. Okay. If you want to have a lot of this building here, you can go to city furniture, right? You type the name SF. Yeah, it actually find it right here. So you double click, it will assign. If you need a lot, you can go to stand of trees. So you treat this as a tree. You can pick up this guy, then you can define a region. So you have this show up. Probably reduce the density a little bit. There's still a lot, but you got the idea. You can easily populate like a neighborhood. You can also drag the height, which will actually scale down the whole thing to have the entire village. Okay. All right, so that's pretty much about the whole process. But I do want to mention one more thing. In Rhino, as you can see, you could control things easily by assign the material to individual mesh, right? But it does not allow you to assign to individual face. Okay, so in the future, if you do want to have, for example, a different material for this triangle shape, okay, so in Rhino you have to break apart this into a separate object, assign a different material, right? So that process is kind of not efficient. That's the reason I think if you want to do this in Max, it's relatively easier, because Max allow you to assign material to individual face. Okay, you don't have to break apart the model. So to demonstrate a little bit on this, I will actually just open the 3ds Max. This is a brand new file, and I will bring that FBX into Max. Okay, so if you do prefer model in Rhino, you can still, use Max to control the texture mapping. So here you can see that is the model from Rhino, right? Oops. So here in Max, if I select the wall, this is roof, this is wall. If you go to the modify, you can actually see this is individual face, points, and edge. So here you can actually select objects based on the component. So that is a little bit different from. Let's see. That's a little bit different from Rhino. Let's switch this to wireframe. Oh, so this is the roof. This is the wall. Okay. So for the wall, if I go to the polygons, let's see. Okay. So let's open the layer first. Yeah, this is, I believe, object 1 is roof. Oh no, that's the wall. Object 2 is roof. Yeah, so this is the wall. Right. So here I should be able to select individual points. That's a little bit funny. Let me just refresh. Let me just refresh the whole thing. And then I will bring this FBX in. Alright, here we go. Alright, so I can turn off the roof. For the wall, I can pick individual face. You know, this is different from Rhino. The benefit is if you do want to assign a different material, you know, for example, this side of the wall versus this side of wall, you can just create a new material in Max and then assign them individually. You don't have to break apart the model. So I will just leave this to you to decide if you want to use Max or not. Here I just show you really quick. It's actually not that difficult. So here in Max, I can go ahead and create a new material. That's precisely the same as, you know, Rhino. And here you can go ahead and click Get Material. That's the same as a new material. I will create a standard material. You know, just double click. It will show up. The standard material by default the color is white, but you could give whatever color you want. Just for the sake of demonstration, I gave a purple color. Right, so that is the new material assigned. You create it, and to assign this to this triangle, you basically just select the triangle, right click. Actually, it's not right click. Is this button assign to selection? Yeah, that's a little bit different from Rhino, but you got the idea. Just apply this solid purple into that triangle. So here, if I'm holding Shift, actually it's holding Alt. Oh, I forgot what's the hotkey to add. Yeah, let's just assign this individually. Actually, here assign that. I can use Z, right, to fit the view. I wonder why this one break into 3 triangles. That's strange. Yeah, holding Control. So you can add triangles in, then you click Assign. Right, so have this multiple surface as purple. That looks pretty good. Yeah. Oops. Yeah, I don't have bottom. That's good. Yeah, I think everything else is fine, right? I just assign these 3, you know, triangle shape as purple. So I have the roof, Well, let's not using purple. Let's using something less saturated. Maybe just white with a little bit grayish. Okay, so that's the color there. All right, then I'm going to just simply select. Oh, you have to get out of this face selection mode. Right? Otherwise, you are locked in a face selection. So get out. Then you can drag the selection. So basically, you have two objects, right, being selected. One is roof, another is wall. Then you export as FBX. So let's give a different name for the sake of demo. Let's give this name 02. Okay, so that's FBX. Just make sure you check the embedded media. So the texture will be embedded in FBX. So here, back to this file, I could just simply double click my old building, right? And then I can swap the FBX to the new one. I think that would be the easiest way. Right, so I swapped that. You can see now is a kind of purplish color here, and I click OK. Once you swap the one in the library, all the children on all the instant will update automatically. Okay, so you don't have to reload. That's a nice thing about the procedural modeling. So you have this really nice village with a lot of tiny house. Okay, I think that is the whole thing for today's demo.